what makes you stand out is you. People may come for the concept, but they stay for you. It's a very personal platform. Parents, and we're businessmen, and we're middle-aged adults, and so there's a level of maturity there. But when we get together, it's that goofy college roommate drinking Mountain Dew and playing video games energy. So in our sponsorship segments, we get really weird and really funny, because that's our most unhinged moments are in our sponsorship segments. And we make sure not to make the brand look bad or to mock the brand, but we're self-deprecating to the core.
A lot of creators fall into this trap where they're like, okay, I have a personal relationship with my audience, so I can't take a sponsorship deal from something that I don't use and deeply believe in personally. And that's not the value proposition. It's okay to advertise a thing, take money from a sponsor that you're advertising a thing that you don't necessarily use every day, but might be really valuable to some people who watch your show.
The show is clinical. Not saying we can't have clinical on the Patreon, but the Patreon needs to be fun and access to us. It's the reason I became a therapist. And so to be able to help so many people while having fun.
Help millions of people by doing the thing you would be doing in your free time anyway.
Yeah.
Like, you unlocked the cheat code to life, man.
This is Alan C. Wright and Jonathan Decker, the hosts of Cinema Therapy. By merging their professional careers of filmmaking and therapy, they have built a 7-figure media company breaking down the psychology and movie magic of movies that we all know and love. While their chemistry and thought-provoking insights are what keeps people watching over and over, it's how they run the back end of their business that fuels their success. In this video, we go into how this brilliant idea could only have come to light because of their unique skill sets. Their incredibly unique commercial spots for their sponsors, why their experience as professionals before YouTube was so crucial to their success, their separate businesses that are fueled by YouTube, and what the future of their multimedia company looks like. Be prepared to laugh, cry, and enjoy watching two wonderful men show genuine love and support for each other, all while building a YouTube empire. The Funded YouTuber is brought to you by Gigastar. The way my face would not stop hurting from smiling when this invite came through on my calendar could not have been bigger. I have been trying to get these guys on the podcast forever, mostly because I have a personal investment in their excellence, but also because I got to meet them in person at different things. So I'm excited to talk with you guys. Thank you, Jonathan Allen, for joining the podcast.
Pleasure to be here, Desiree. I'm glad we could finally make this work. We've been talking about it for forever. It feels like
10 months.
We finally had an eye of the hurricane in our schedule where it's like calm for a week and it's like now. So yeah.
To start off, for those that don't know, what do you guys create on the internet? And I think for answering questions, let's start with Alan and then go to Jonathan.
I'm Alan C. Wright. I'm a professional filmmaker who needs therapy. And so I created the cinema part.
Okay, I'm Jonathan Decker. I'm the licensed therapist who loves movies, so I created the therapy part. It's we have a YouTube channel called Cinema Therapy, which I tell people, if you're old enough to get the reference, it's like Mr. Rogers meets Siskel and Ebert. And if you're not old enough to get the reference, we're like a show that is like our show. Because there's not really anything else like it on YouTube, but it's assessing the psychology and the filmmaking of your favorite movies and mining them for both how they did it, how the filmmaking was done, as well as tips and guidelines and a springboard for discussion for emotional health and mental health and healthy relationships. And so the idea is that it's edutainment and that you're learning and growing and becoming a better person, but you don't even feel it happening because you're just laughing a lot and geeking out.
And crying.
So much crying.
Wow. Feel called out. Thanks.
If you binge, if you go let's watch all of the Pixar episodes, it's just a lot of crying, the Pixar playlist.
Pixar. If you watch a bunch of Pixar movies, that's a lot of crying.
If people are listening in or watching and they've never seen our show, Alan C. Wright, if you've seen the meme of Dawson crying from Dawson's Creek, there you go. I do the rest of the show. That's what he does. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I am an ugly crier. It is true.
The thing that's so funny about Pixar movies is I didn't used to cry at movies and I became a parent and now I cry at everything. And I think that it just the things that resonate with you at different times in your life based on where you are, it just hits. It hits so much different. And I think that that's kind of where a lot of the crying comes from. But the big question is, how does a therapist and a filmmaker get together to make a YouTube channel?
Well, Alan and I were college roommates, and there's a longer version of the story, but the shorter version is that I made an independent film just for fun, and then he made a sequel, which was much better, and then he became a filmmaker, and then he has he has proceeded to praise or blame me depending on how that's going given the year. And so, uh, and after a lot of years of getting married, having kids, having a professional life, we circled back together where I had an idea for a YouTube channel because we'd wanted to do a project together like we did back in college. We wanted to work together again, and I had seen him doing a YouTube channel that he was doing a political channel on YouTube, and he had such great presence on camera and such great not chemistry, you can't have chemistry with yourself. So charisma is the word I'm looking for. That I thought, oh man, and this idea, I thought, what if he and I did a YouTube show? And I thought, well, he's a filmmaker, I'm a therapist, and then it literally arrived fully formed within about 2 minutes in my brain. This idea to he and I talk about movies together like Siskel and Ebert used to do, but he would break down the filmmaking and I would break down the psychology. And then I called him, and I'll let him take the story from here.
Jonathan got about 2 sentences in to the description of what the show was, and I cut him off. I was like, shut up. I know exactly what this show is. It's going to have 1 million subscribers someday. And I thought that would take 5 years, and it took 7 months.
Yeah. No, it took us more than that to reach 1 million.
Well, it took more than that to reach 1 million. It took a year and a bit to get to 1 million.
Yeah, but that was wild.
The thing about it for me, like, it came at such a necessary time in the world. So I discovered a YouTube channel through my husband. So my husband, who is a disabled veteran, I think fell into your channel because he also loves movies and he also needs therapy, and he's in therapy. And it hit him at the perfect ball. I think right around Thanksgiving of 2020, which I know was when you guys had kind of started like your ascent into greatness with popularity, but so many people needed it. They were stuck at home. They were so sad. They're dealing with all of their stuff. What do you think it is about your channel that allowed for it to hit just at the right point and then continues to still be a integral part of people's weekly YouTube watching?
There's a lot of factors to it. Obviously, we launched because I lost my job because of COVID. And Jono had talked to me about this, I guess it was 4 or 5 months before that. And we were like, someday in the future we'll do it. And I called him up and I was like, hey, I just lost my job. Let's do this right now because people are stuck at home watching movies and having mental health crises. And they're only going to be there for 3 weeks. We got to
strike while the iron's hot.
We got to get going. Little did we know
that it was going to be a couple years. Yeah.
2 years later, we're all still stuck at home watching movies. There's a little bit of cosmic timing there. But on top of that, the big thing is I believe in the power of cinema, filmed entertainment, whatever you want to call it. TV has sort of blended with movies at this point where like high quality TV is better than a lot of movies that come out in theaters. Anyway, point is filmed entertainment has this unique ability to access our emotions. And Jonathan is a world-class expert at that. He actually wrote his master's thesis on characters from Pixar films.
The portrayal of gender in Pixar films, and it was a quantitative analysis. Like, yeah. And it got published internationally, which is weird.
You write about Pixar. That's where the eyeballs are. But, he's a world-class expert. I'm mediocre class moderate failure, but I know a lot of things and I'm good at talking about them.
Just waiting for that big break, man. Because the fact is, and that's something I guess we can talk about as we get into this interview, is Alan's got the skill, he's got the talent, and now we're funding our own projects, but through Cinema Therapy Studios. But I'm just planting the seed. We can have that conversation a little bit down the line today, I guess.
We knew we were going to be going there. Okay, so you merge your two skills into one concept. You connect with people, you cry with people, you do all of the emotional tugging, the great storytelling, you find the good balance of what's happening in your episodes. At some point, though, especially if Alan, who has a family and kids and all that stuff, like he's like, hey, I need money because I have to, use this to fund my life while I wait for work to come back. When did the business part of this open up for you guys? Like, how did you start? Like, what were like your first taste of income and how did it snowball from there?
Our first real foray into, I was so confident in the channel that about 2 weeks after we launched the channel on YouTube, I squatted on the name in Patreon. So I was like, we're coming. We're gonna be there someday. But we didn't launch because 3 people had watched our videos at that point, and they were all my wife.
Would
We got our first taste of income.
have been November 2020.
Yeah, that was when we got our first check from YouTube. We got monetized in September, but we didn't get a check until November.
And the 7 months Alan was referring to earlier was 7 months in Thanksgiving of 2020 is when the algorithm got hold of 2 of our videos, which was Tangled. We did an episode on Mother Gothel from Tangled, and gaslighting, and Therapist Reacts to Inside Out, and just really started pushing those videos. And our channel grew from, I want to say it was 4,000 subs to 100,000 subs. Does that sound right, Alan?
It was 3,000 on November 13th, and it was 250,000 by mid-December.
Yeah, there you go. But I do think it hit 100,000 just over that weekend, like over Thanksgiving weekend. Like, it was insane.
It was crazy. We were doing 35,000 subscribers a day for a couple of days there.
We've never had growth like that since. We've had spikes and stuff, but that was where we were like, oh, good. We really believed this would work, but somewhere in the back of your mind, there's always this, but what if it doesn't?
To be fair, I need therapy. I still think that all the time.
But we got AdSense revenue first, which led to sponsor opportunities.
And for us, the sponsor opportunities just kind of started arriving in our email inbox because, sponsors keep their ears to the ground and like, who's doing well and what's happening. And we started getting emails. So we had to give ourselves a really quick crash course on all the terminology for like sponsor rates and legal terminology and all that stuff. We hired a lawyer. We did a bunch of stuff to make sure that we weren't getting hosed, which some sponsors are very good and super upfront and honest, and some sponsors really want the most views for the least amount of money, and they'll be
duplicitous and dishonest, and yeah,
they'll be aggressive. We'll put it that way.
I feel like you also have an added benefit too within your sponsorship opportunities is that you guys you're grown-ups, right? Like a lot of people in the creator space, especially when they're getting started, they're younger. Like I would argue like that under 30 crowd. So I would think that there's also a sense of like, with Jonathan having his therapy business and you being in film and all this kind of stuff, like there was this level of like, we probably can't pull the wool over their eyes because they know things and we don't.
Well, and particularly, I mean, Jonathan was already running a successful business, and I've worked in the entertainment business for 15 years. I've worked with like actual scumbags who are the worst. Like I know the things to look out for, and I know the reasons to have a lawyer. Like it is a very important thing to do. As soon as you can afford one, you should afford one and have them look at your contracts for you. So like, and it's not because, the world is full of terrible people who are out to get you, but it's, you just, everybody's looking out for their own ends, and there's nothing wrong with that. You just have to have professionals help you with it.
If I may add, I don't know if this was a question that's coming down the pipe or not, but I feel like since we're talking about building a YouTube business, I don't think you need to do it the way we do it, but what makes you stand out is you, right? Like people may come for the concept, but they stay for you. It's a very personal platform. And that includes sponsorship integrations. I can't tell you how many YouTube videos I watch where I skip the integrations because you can tell they're just kind of like, I'll get this over with. And Alan and I very much, we're parents and we're businessmen and we're middle-aged adults. And so there's a level of maturity there. But when we get together, it's that goofy college roommate drinking Mountain Dew and playing video games energy. And so in our sponsorship segments, we get really weird and really funny. And that, because that's our most unhinged moments are in our sponsorship segments. And we make sure not to make the brand look bad or to mock the brand, but we're self-deprecating to the core. And we get this comment all the time that your guys' sponsorship segments are the only ones on YouTube that I don't skip because I don't want to miss anything. And that attracts sponsors for us because they know it's going to get watched.
That was literally what my next question was going to be. We have to talk about your sponsor segments. Okay. So I do a ton with like teaching people about creator businesses and things and I always say like, people like, I need to figure out how to do sponsors, but I don't know how to do it in a way that makes sense. Because so many people presume that sponsorship segments need to be like the episode or the video I'm making needs to support this creator, this business's thing. So for example, if I'm working with Stanley, my whole episode needs to be about 10 ways to use Stanley to like make yourself look cool in life. Like that would be like the video, right? But it's sponsored by Stanley. What you guys do in your, as you've in using your words, your unhinged way is you do commercial spots, like a very traditional like TV model. But what's so great about what you guys do is because I've studied it and you guys can like pick apart what I'm saying. You guys, like, because I know your production schedule, you guys get together, you record a whole bunch of episodes and change your shirts and just keep going. Like it's like a binge couple of days where you're creating content. But then you have your commercial spots where you're making commercial spots for brands completely unrelated to what you're talking about. So like if you're talking about Inside Out 2, your commercial isn't going to be about, better help. It's going to be about maybe like headphones or something. And but how you talk about the product in your commercial spot is it's still related to the video in some way, shape, or form, but you guys are doing it remotely and in like your own quirky creative ways. How did you get there? Like what was that like process that concluded that this is what was going to work for us and how we were going to do it? Because I have not seen anybody else do commercial spots in this way.
There was definitely some strategy there. I'm not saying there wasn't. A lot of it came organically from our energy as friends, and also the fact that Alan has such a strong background in creation, from commercials to television shows to films to music videos to all the things he's been hired to direct, and so a lot of that goes into he knows marketing. He knows what's going to help a spot work. But then there's also the component of we both wrote comedy in college. And so there, and Alan's wife, our producer, is an incredibly talented writer. And the sponsorship segments are always, at this point, they're scripted by her. And then Alan and I will add a couple of jokes here and there, but, but I was always going to tie back into the film because that's more fun. Instead of just saying this week's episode is brought to you by blah, 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 blah. If you can make dad jokes and puns that tie into the movie that we're advertising, like we did Ratatouille and we were talking about, and I roasted Alan in the Ratatouille sponsorship segment because he's talking about how he struggled to make money making movies. And it was for debt solutions. It was for debt solutions. And I said, anyone can cook, but not anyone can direct. And Alan, and then Alan laughed hard because Alan loves a good roast, which is the only reason why I do it, because I don't want to be mean. And like that sort of stuff where it's very much still just us.
The sort of strategy business side of it comes from, again, like Jono said, I've directed commercials for 12, 13 years now. I've directed more than 100 of them, and some national spots, a bunch of regional spots, stuff like this. I've also worked at an ad agency where we did media buys and all of this stuff. And when a lot of creators fall into this trap where they're like, okay, I have a personal relationship with my audience, so I can't like take a sponsorship deal from something that I don't use and deeply believe in personally. And that's not the value proposition. Like the value proposition in my mind, like we're making a show. Everyone on YouTube is making a show. Like even if it's a vlog of your life, it's the show version of your life. Everybody's doing some kind of heightened version of themselves, right? Because of that, like it's okay to advertise a thing, like, take money from a sponsor that you're advertising a thing that you don't necessarily use every day, but might be really valuable to some people who watch your show. Like not everything that we do, like we will not do a sponsorship for something that we find scummy or scammy or weird, like morally, like we've ended relationships with people after we found bad things about them. We've turned down a whole bunch of sponsorship opportunities because they just seem, you get that ick factor when you read their pitch. It's like, it seems like you're just taking money from people. So we won't advertise those, but if it's like, okay, this is a product that's like a real thing or a real service, maybe it's not one that we need, but it could be useful to this chunk of our audience. We'll take money to make sure that they know about it. That's fine. Like that's what television advertising is.
And then sometimes we get stuff that we're legitimately excited about and that we use.
A lot of stuff.
Anytime they send us food, like anyone who sends us food,
we get pretty excited.
yeah.
Any of those meal kits, baby.
Well, I mean that what goes better than like food and movies. Like yesterday was my anniversary. Like to the grocery store and like put together a charcuterie, and we watched I think watched like Horizon or something like that, the new Kevin Costner movie. Like can't watch movies and not eat food. Like even like popcorn and stuff is like the bare minimum. So
well, that's our longest term sponsor is popcorn. We've actually we have our own brand of popcorn. It's just repackaged.
It's the same company that's always sponsored us, makes the popcorn.
It's been with us for 4 years now. So
they were our sponsor when what we received for this show was free popcorn. They didn't pay us. We just got free popcorn for our show.
This was when we had I think we signed them up when we had 1,100 subscribers and a total of maybe 15,000 views or something.
And for those watching or listening, the popcorn legitimately is delicious. But after it's now almost 5 years, Alan and I are both finally tired of it. But it's not the popcorn's fault. It's just like,
it's our fault.
We ate so much of it.
We ate too much of it.
I have purchased the popcorn. It is definitely good and worth having, especially because I mean, you only do so much with like oil and salt, right? And they do all the fun extra flavors and stuff. And I think that that's a really fun brand integration. And it talks about how like, one, it doesn't matter where you are in your creator journey, you can find the right brand partners if it aligns appropriately. And you can figure out like, how does like growing together look like? You, in your case, it was you started off with just a free product because you wanted to have like a probably a case study or just because you want a popcorn, like whatever the reason is. And then you also, now it's the point where you have your own version of their popcorn and it's a subscription model and you get all the popcorn, the flavors, and you do movie and popcorn pairing. It's like, it's a whole different thing. And I think that that's really important when people are thinking about where they are as smaller creators, like what could a long-term partnership with a brand really look like that could be beneficial to us both in a creative way. Okay. So we got to talk about the thing I was talking about, wanted to talk about the most, which is the brand partnership piece of it, because your sponsorships are, like you said, unhinged, but also truly brilliant. And I think a great point with what you guys are doing. So you're going along this journey and you guys you have this intense growth. At some point, you have to pivot from being just creators to being creator business owners. What were the things that you guys had to put in place along the way that allow for you guys to focus on what you guys do best, which is the product, the creating of videos, and all the other things that make the machine of cinema therapy work?
The number one thing we had to do was I needed creative help. And then the number two thing was we needed management help. So that basically what that meant is hiring editors to take over, because the first 44 episodes of the show, I did everything. The managerial help, we ended up hiring our first full-time employee, our producer, Corinne, and she very much runs the show for us. She's also starting to take over a lot of creative stuff. She's written several episodes. She helps us with the creative on almost every episode now, along with Megan, our other producer, who's also my wife. So that's she kind of got roped into it and then figured out she was really good at it.
The editing team, the extension was, Alan edited the episodes, figured out the show, right? And that's when I had the idea beyond just Alan's, my best friend and that we would be great on camera together. I knew that what I brought to the table was all the clinical, right? I am still the clinical voice of the show. Like I'm it. But I needed somebody who could produce basically a full episode of a television show every week. And that wasn't me. And he had the skill set for it. And so he figured out the show. And there was about 5 minutes where this idea was just mine before I called him. And I called him, and as we worked things out, I immediately gave him, and this was not a foolhardy decision. This was me knowing him and knowing our dynamics. I said, I want you to have full creative control over the show. And I've never regretted that decision.
Well, and Jono's being modest, he makes huge contributions to the show, obviously, clinically and in the writing of every episode, but in the post side as well, especially early on, a lot of the tone of the show, like I would come in with an edit and have, cutaways and jokes and sort of tightening things up into the shape that it was at. And then Jono would come in and just like here's 15 references that you missed, and here's a complete joke that you totally blew right past. Like, we can put an emphasis on it this way. So a good amount of the flavor of the show is John as well.
Thank you. That's very well. But the point is, like, you and I and Megan like figured out the show, and then you said to me, "I'm getting worn out. I need editors, and they're going to do a better job than I will." And I thought, well, they might do 80% as good a job as you, but no one's going to do a better job as you will. And then we got an editor. His very first episode was better than Alan's, and I'm not saying that to insult Alan. Alan's the first one.
No.
We were both like, oh.
No, it's Trevor. He's a great friend of mine. I've known him for a long time, and I was like, I'm going to have Trevor cut the first one so that when Jono sees it, he goes, "Oh,
our show just leveled up." And
oh, it's better now.
We love our editing team. And then, yeah, with Corinne, we needed somebody who understood, and she was a fan of the show before she was a member of the team. And she came aboard and understanding the culture, understanding the tone, but also much better at organizing and managing tasks than Alan or I, and keeping everybody on point. And so that helped us to streamline, and then it also helped us to expand into doing other things.
I know that the decision was made because you're like, I need help. We need like help with turning these out to maintain our pacing and keep doing our stuff. But what was the process of like letting go of those things and handing them off? Because I know a lot of creators get really nervous about like hiring or letting people on because one, there's a money concern. Like, we're like, I don't know, do I have the money for this? But then there's also this other part of it that's like, no one can do it as good as me. Or also like, I mean, I'm doing fine-ish. I might be drowning and working 100 hours a week, but like, it's getting done. Like, like, what advice do you have around helping creators get to that point where like you have to let go so that you can focus on your job, which is the product of creating?
It's find the thing that you are uniquely best at in your show, your creation, whatever it is, and focus on that, right? It wasn't all that difficult for me to sort of give up my stuff that I was doing, because I've worked in film for so long that I know that I am at best mediocre at most things. And there are people who are exceptional at all of those individual things. And so it just kind of comes from, I've been doing this for long enough to know that like there are better editors than me, and they're going to level up the show. And there are far better producers than me, and it's going to make the show run more smoothly.
If I may, Alan, as somebody who's observed you on film sets and worked with you on film sets and then on our show, you are good. You range from good enough to very good at a lot of things. I really do think you are an excellent director. And part of being an excellent director is assembling the team, like having the vision and then assembling the team.
90% of being an excellent director is just assembling a good team and then getting out of their way. The other 10% is occasionally going, actually, I meant this.
Yeah.
I didn't communicate that well. Do you understand now? And then they go, oh, I get it. And then they do a thing that's better than the thing you thought. You're like, yes, that was my idea.
But you've got to make sure they're pulling in the same direction.
Right.
And one thing that I love that you have done with our show is you encourage and foster the creativity of our editing team to where all of our editors have a unique voice in their edits, while still making it feel like our show. It doesn't go too far off the rails.
Yeah, the show always feels like the show, but a David episode feels uniquely unhinged in a special David way.
It's kind of like how they're all Harry Potter movies, but each one has a different style.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's very much a good analog.
And I think that what's great about watching your show over the past 4 years now is that you can see how it's grown up and how you add in a lot of humor and fun and like how you dig into stuff. But then there's also been a lot of like growth within the two of you about like how you dive into things and what you talk about. And like, I remember there was a point in time in the show where it was a lot of therapy and not a lot of cinema. And like, it was noticeable in the comment section. And then like you picked that up on your, like, let's talk about the film and adding that in and things like that. And so it's been really fun to watch you guys, because the biggest thing about what you've done that I think is the genius of your work is it's not the Alan and Jono show. It's Cinema Therapy, which is a media company focused on this weekly show that connects with people's hearts and minds around something they love, which is movies. And I think that is, I think, the goal for most creators, and most of them just miss that mark so many times.
We were very lucky in that we came up with a great idea for a thing that Jonathan and I could do that is not limited to a thing Jonathan and I can do. Like, we can add additional shows in the future with different hosts
Right.
that follow a similar template and model. And we just kind of got lucky that that was the genius idea that Jono had.
I think there's going to be a balance. Like, we're going to have to figure that out, because I also don't want to downplay the friendship that we have. It's built on, it's like Nick Frost and Simon Pegg. There's a language there and a give and take that comes from decades of friendship that you don't necessarily get just by throwing any two people together.
Even when they're playing sort of vastly different characters, you still feel
right.
There's a very obvious connection there, even when the characters theoretically hate each other.
Right.
Or when the characters are best friends. Like, it works both ways.
And so as we expand what I don't like the word empire unless it's Star Wars, but as we expand what we do and as we bring in more,
you do know the Empire was the bad guys, right?
I know.
Yeah, right?
That's why I don't want to be. I don't want us to have an empire.
Grow your media
Our
brand.
media republic.
As we expand our commune. No, I feel like it's not just a expertise fit. They need to have that fun energy, and it can be like The Daily Show, or it can be like various TV shows where cast members have gotten swapped out. You still got to make sure the formula works.
Well, it's almost like what Theorists has done, right? They have game theorists, fashion theorists, food theorists. I could totally see you guys being TV therapy and fashion therapy or pop culture therapy. Like, there's a lot that you can build off of the brand of what you guys have built. I know you guys are just getting started, but also, like, if you just keep going with what you're doing and continue to grow as creators, you're still going to be able to build something that's really great and I think really fruitful and impactful for people's lives. Like, my story around cinema therapy is that because cinema therapy exists, my husband, who is a disabled veteran, was able to actually get help for the first time in 4 years at the time of him trying to figure it out. And it saved his life, and it saved our marriage, and it saved our kids' futures, because I was a simple matter of, you guys had a YouTube video, and I asked myself a question. I was like, I wonder if Jonathan is a practicing therapist. Yeah. And I went and Googled you, and I found it, and I went to your website, and I filled out a form, and like, he's on a track for healing. And that's like a big impactful deal. And I think that when we think about how we want to have longevity as creators, it's not just about building brands that are sustainable. It's about the lives and the communities that we touch along the way that I think we as just regular people never thought we would get to do. Like, you always, when we were growing up, it was so much of, I can only be impactful if, like, I'm in politics or I'm on TV or in movie theaters, like the Brad Pitts and, all that of the world. But we get to be regular people impacting people's lives and making a difference in small but meaningful ways. And so it's like this two-sided thing of, like, building a successful business that provides and thrives, but also being impactful and helping change people's lives as well.
It really matters to me, hearing how he's doing. And I, of course, am bound by HIPAA not to bring stuff like that up, but you're not. So I'm not.
I tell everybody, I'm like, do you guys want to meet my husband's therapist? You should go watch his YouTube channel all the time, because it's impactful. And like, the amount of people that have messaged me like, well, there goes my weekend, or Desiree, I didn't want to cry this much. And it just always tends to work out. So speaking of this, I think it's a really solid transition into the next part of this is what you guys have been able to build individually because of your YouTube business. So you're building this business, this thing where you come together a couple times a year, and then you go back apart and let the system and the machine that you built work. What have you guys been able to build because of your YouTube channel as individuals that has supported your individual endeavors?
For me, this was always like, I love the show and I love doing it. And, I get to talk about movies with my best friend, and I get to be overly emotional in front of millions of people, which is definitely what I always pictured doing. But I from the very beginning, sort of as a soulless commercial automaton, was like, okay, I can find an audience with this, and hopefully I can port some of that audience over and be able to make films, which is still my passion. Like, this is, the reason I get up in the morning, and I've been able to do that. We kickstarted a film 2 years ago, which my producer very cleverly decided to cast with Jono. That was not my initial plan to have Jonathan be the scary guy in my movie, but we made a little short horror film that's done kind of well on YouTube. Because we've been able to grow our Patreon so much with the audience that we have, and because Jonathan has been very, very gracious, we've decided to convert a significant chunk of that Patreon money every year into producing films under Cinema Therapy Studios, is what we're calling it.
Yeah.
And we're going to make a short film here in a couple months. We're going to make another one next year. We're working on potentially transitioning that into creating feature films that we will release to our patrons, but also, distribute in theaters and, potentially on streaming platforms if any of them want to buy them,
Yeah.
And so for me, this has enabled me to sort of chase the parts of the dream that I always wanted. Like I've been a director, and there's nothing wrong with directing commercials. I enjoy doing that. I've worked in reality television and enjoyed that. I've done documentary TV. I've done other things. But the pull for me has always been narrative feature-length films. There's something magic to me about that 2-hour experience, particularly in a movie theater where you're sitting with a bunch of strangers and you're having a shared emotional experience and you all walk out talking about the same thing. Like that's just, it's something special. Now I get to pursue that and not have to worry every single second about like, hey, I got 3 kids to feed.
Yeah.
That has enabled for me. Weirdly, it's actually cut down on I don't work in the industry as often as I used to, because obviously I used to have to basically take anything that came along to put food on the table.
Yeah.
I still do stuff occasionally, but I kind of get to pick and choose which projects I work on, which is really nice. I do have to occasionally turn down, I got offered to go an assistant director and second unit director on a show that was going to be 2.5 months in Lithuania. And I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So I had to turn that down. But like most of the time, it's been just a really great thing for me personally to be able to direct my career in the direction that I want it to go instead of sort of following after the direction that it is going on its own.
Yeah. And for me, I was clinical director of a trauma clinic called Mended Light. I say was because cinema therapy allowed me to go from when we started, I had to have a full caseload to keep the lights on and food in the fridge. And then it went to like, oh, I can fill up my schedule now. And now how do I have to work less? And we hired therapists, and then I was clinical director, and then we hired a clinical director to take my place. So now I don't oversee therapists anymore. And then I was able to take 6 months off from doing therapy just because I wanted a breather. And now, I'm seeing clients again on a limited basis. So for me, it allowed me to do what I love most, which is watching movies and talking about movies. I guess it's neck and neck with the other thing I love most, which is helping people. And I know that sounds cheesy, but like that's the reason I became a therapist. And so to be able to help so many people while having fun,
millions of people by doing the thing you would be doing in your free time anyway. Yeah. Like you unlocked the cheat code to life, man.
No, like for me personally,
like every time we show up on set, Jono's just like, this is everything I've ever dreamed. And I'm like, this is a really good thing that I like doing. Someday I'll get to do my dream.
But hence that's why when you talk about me being gracious with Cinema Therapy Studios and Patreon money going to fund that, that's the biggest reason why is it's not exactly quid pro quo because that sounds vulgar, but it's like, man, you gave so much to get my dream off the ground. Like this is my way of returning the favor as best I can so that you can do yours. And I'm happy to do that. So for me, it's the biggest thrill is when we go to conventions or when we are at public events where we get to meet our fans and just to people hug us. Sometimes we all cry together, we laugh together, and to meet people to realize like, wow, we're actually helping people with their lives by talking about movies. I mean, how in the hell? But here we are.
It's still so weird for me.
Yeah.
I never would have made the connection. To me, movies always been entertaining. My background is actually animation. I wanted to be an animator for Disney. That's what I went to college for. So I wanted to do from the time I was 10 and saw Toy Story in theaters. And so that didn't work out for me because when I graduated from college and was looking for work, the recession was happening and like everything was going under and there wasn't that opportunity for me. But I always remember like how I felt like the emotional connection. And like I was 10, I remember like my toys totally come to life.
Yeah.
I believed that before that movie, and being able to have that wild imagination and being able to keep that childlikeness even through as an adult, especially now that I have kids and I make that as part of their reality as well. There's so much that we can learn from movies and the storytelling within it. And it's so
Right.
healing and it's so necessary, I think, for our success as humans. But it's all subconscious when you have someone talking about it and breaking it down. You're like, oh, that's what's wrong with me. It's a totally different, it's a
Well,
totally different
can I give
experience.
you a quick peek behind the curtain about how that came to be? So in graduate school, I realized that I loved all of the information I was learning. It was so vital and helpful, but it was packaged so clinically and so academically that your average person,
So dry.
yeah, your average person was never going to consume it and was therefore never going to benefit from it. And so when I started doing group therapy or I started doing classes in the community on healthy relationships, I would teach this principle and then I'd be like, here's a clip from a movie that illustrates it. And let's talk about how this looks in real life versus in the movie, but at least getting the ball rolling. And that was the inroad. That's I think that's why the idea arrived fully formed when it did, is because it was already there. The groundwork was already there in my mind.
It arrived fully formed 10 years after you started working on it.
I guess it arrived fully formed after 10 years of going, what do I do with my love for movies? Yeah. But the biggest compliment, at least for me, is when I hear from therapists or professors who talk about how we get the psychology right, or we get the family therapy principles right. Because what people don't necessarily see, and my biggest fear was that we'd be perceived as like a fluff channel, is a lot of effort goes into making sure that what we're talking about is scientifically and evidence based. And when we get it wrong, that we own it publicly and make a correction, which doesn't happen often, but it's happened a few times, you know?
Well, it's also specific topic driven. Like you'll dive into like this is a specific thing from this film that we're going to dive into, like narcissism or something
Or
like that.
dissociative identity disorder, or
Yeah.
And Jonathan does a huge amount of research on that. It's really impressive. I do a huge amount of research too, but for me it's fun. I'm just opening up like, Fangoria magazine. I'm like, ooh, how'd they do the blood effects?
Right, and you're popping
like,
in the Blu-rays and watching the making of stuff, and then when we film our episodes, you're like, well, Spielberg said, and I'm like, you bastard, like, you get the easy fun stuff.
So I do have a question though that has to do with like the fund that you're doing for your projects. Do you think that your fund will get to a point, like rather than funding your own projects, that you would help fund other aspiring filmmakers' projects?
I very much would love to have that be the case. I'm not sure that just funding from our cinema therapy stuff is ever going to get there, but if we are able to build, my visions and dreams for the studio and the productions that we're going to be able to do are grandiose. But yeah, a big part of what I would like to do, Jonathan mentioned it a little bit, I'm a huge believer in mentorship and raising up like other people's voices. I feel like the world has an awful lot of middle-class white guys telling stories in cinema.
And we can't help that. That's what we are.
Yeah, and it's not that my stories have no value. It's just like there's a lot of me already.
Yeah.
If I have any amount of success, I want to use that to help other people who have equally awesome or even better stories that we don't get to see very often. And so that's kind of that we're going to go for. The unfortunate reality is you kind of have to have commercial success. It is like film is so expensive. There's a reason it's a film business, because you can't just get together with two people and make a movie for $12 and have it be good. They take a lot of time,
as
and a lot of
evidenced
effort
by
from
our
a whole
first
lot
film.
of people. Accurate.
One of the things that we do very uniquely here on the Fun YouTuber podcast is we break down your income by percentages based on where your income comes from. So for yours, you have a very simple 4 income streams that you guys collectively get through cinema therapy. 25% comes from AdSense and 45% comes from sponsorship. But you do have 25% of your income that does come from your Patreon membership. Talk about that. Like you said earlier in the episode, like you sat on that, like in the early days. How did you guys decide to do what you do with your Patreon?
It was a membership site first that was focused more on the clinical side of things. And then, but Alan was always, and rightly so, he was correct, but he was like, we need to shift to Patreon and we need to be more about, like, the show is clinical. Not saying we can't have clinical on the Patreon, but the Patreon needs to be fun and access to us. And he was right. And the Patreon, honestly, as somebody who did comedy in college, I love it as a creative outlet because we create things on Patreon that trigger the FOMO on YouTube that people are missing out on. You know, we do sketch comedy. We're making short films. We do deep dives on filmmaking, deep dives on.
We still do clinical, we still do clinical stuff so that Jono can scratch that itch. But
yeah,
and that stuff is some of our most popular content.
We just dropped one yesterday, or was it today, on attachment
I think it
theory.
was this morning.
Yeah, and then the director's cuts. So people go to the Patreon to get the commercial-free director's cuts, and I mean, Alan, you can speak more to this, but the whole notion of it's the same thing with the sponsorship on YouTube. How do we add value so that it's not just, hey, support us, but we're creating stuff that you will want to see?
Yeah, and it's been an evolving process. The idea of turning our Patreon into a movie studio actually came 6 months after we'd started the Patreon. It was actually prompted by the CEO of Patreon. He straight up asked me, he's like, why aren't people on Patreon doing film stuff? And I was like, well, you're a music guy. Like, he started Patreon because he's a musician and wanted a way to have like a steady income stream. Like, that's the origins of the company. And I was like, look, Jack, if you want to go record a new song, you know, it costs you $100-$200 for the studio for the day and maybe a couple $100 for a sound engineer. If I want to go film a movie, and you have a song in a couple of hours, if I want to go film a movie, I have to get 50 people on set and they all cost X hundreds of dollars per day. And I have to have them on set for 20 to 50 days. And he was like, oh,
that's why.
It's like, there's just not enough money there. So he sort of asked me that and at this like Patreon meeting at their headquarters, and then sort of in the middle of their company meeting that they were having, I just blurted out, I was like, I figured it out. And so I just pitched the whole company the idea, like right in front of the company. And then afterwards I was like, that might've been really stupid and out of line. I don't know what I'm doing.
Turns out they love you. If I may, like, because it's not me, it's you and Emily are the, you know, and different members of the creative team are the major driving force behind this. But we're kind of trailblazing what can be done with Patreon. We're doing things that nobody else has done before, and it's successful for us.
I think the biggest thing that the creator economy is struggling with is how can we do more for our audience and stop relying on brand partnerships and to be financially stable and successful. It's also forces the secondary questions, like how can we give value that isn't just get this extra bonus video,
Right.
or, you know, do a monthly live stream together. Like, it's like there has to be this other piece of it, which is that idea of like having a vested interest in the success of this creator business. There's a lot to kind of unpack and consider within that. And if you guys have figured it out, like, it's a great test case for the rest of us.
Well, we haven't. We'll let you know.
I will say we're working on several ideas right now, but I know we don't feel comfortable like publicly talking about them because we haven't tested them yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would hate to talk about them here and then a year from now be like, oh man, that was embarrassing.
Wow, we blew it.
Big miss. No, I think that it's important to, like, it's also kind of nice to know that like even creators, they're at your level, like over 1 million subscribers, doing all of these things, 7-figure, all the things, you're still struggling with different things and testing things out and trying to figure out what to do next.
Extremely low 7-figure.
Yeah.
Extremely low, barely 7 figures.
Right.
Do we need to therapize the cinema therapy guys?
Like,
you guys gotta stop being like so self-deprecating.
No, he's right, and the fact is, like, we have a solid team around us. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we live comfortably, but none of us, I would say, are like rich, you know, unless we're rich in love.
There's a difference between being a 7-figure business and having a 7-figure salary. And we're not talking about individual salaries. We're talking about the business, the media. Again, you're a media company. You're not just like rando individual solo creator guys, right? So it's a very different, like, you guys have staff, you have writers, producers, managers, like you have equipment. You guys have to travel back and forth to get to each other and do all of these different things. Like, you've gone to events, like there's a lot that goes into your businesses that is accounted for, where I'm sure that when we look at like your profit margins, it's more manageable and reasonable and obtainable for other people. But it's not the point of what we're talking about.
Sorry,
You're still
Desiree, I
built this
derailed
thing. That's right. You still built this thing, and that's a big, and it was a great thing. It's a great thing that you guys have built that truly impacts people's lives in from two sides. Like, I wish more than anything that I had gotten onto YouTube and figured it out much sooner in my creative space, because it would probably have kind of completely changed everything that I done. Like, I remember uploading my demo reel to YouTube and people being like, why would you do that? That's so weird. When everyone else, like, we are just doing all these DVDs to like shell out and put in the mail and stuff. And like it changes things. And so it's a different way to be able to approach. Like, I've seen a lot of conversations with editors that are like, I could go be editor for TV and film, but they're also, I actually just want to go figure out how to be an editor for YouTube people, because it's a totally different way, and it's a completely relevant focus that people can like dig into and find success in. So there's all kinds of things that kind of go
Yeah.
into this. So I have my final two questions for you guys. One that is my usual, and one that is based on what you guys just said, which is talking about the cinematic experience. What has been your favorite cinema moment?
Oh, that's a long list for me.
No, I know exactly what yours is. It's the end of Speed Racer. At least that's what you said.
What?
Or that might change.
Okay.
It might change every week. I don't know.
No. So, okay, that's one of my all-time favorite scenes.
Okay.
When you say cinematic moment, do you mean like moment at the movie theater, or what's the?
Yes. So the one that's most recent that everyone has gotten to experience is when you're watching Deadpool versus Wolverine, and you're watching Blade walk in, and you're watching Elektra walk in, and then all of a sudden there's Channing Tatum dressed up like Gambit. Like, that's a theater cinematic moment where everyone's like, oh snap. Or, when the Avengers all come together in the Endgame battle and he finally says Avengers assemble after 20 something movies. That's, as you said, a cinema moment that you experience with other people.
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
My favorite, the one that sticks in my head the most, is the Ride of the Rohirrim at the midnight screening for Return of the King opening night.
Yeah.
It was like, I'd never seen anything like that on film. No one else in the theater had ever seen anything like that on film. We were obviously all super hyped to be there. These are the greatest films ever made. And are they going to stick the landing? Not are they going to stick it. They're going to run 6,000 horses through the middle of it. Like, I literally jumped out of my seat.
Yeah.
As a 23-year-old grown-ass man, I jumped out of my seat and was pumping my fists like, yeah. Anyway, that was probably it for me. But I've had 30 moments like that, right? That's the high I'm chasing my whole life, is that.
What's yours, Jono?
I took my kids to a screening, a special like party screening of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom at Alamo Drafthouse. So not only did we have...
You took your kids to Temple of Doom?
I'm a good father. So listen, they had pom-pom whips. So it was a full theater. And they had pom-pom whips for you to crack anytime he cracked his whip. They had balloons that you blew up. And then at the beginning, when all the balloons fall down in the club, everyone throws their white balloons in the air. They had snakes for everyone to play with and hiss whenever there's a snake on screen. Everyone had a plush heart to hold up and scream Kali Ma together. And then the best thing they did is they gave everyone a kazoo, and everyone was under strict, like the rules were very strict, and everyone kept the rules. You were quiet and you enjoyed the movie, except for in the interactive moments. And anytime,
well, it's Alamo Drafthouse, they'll kick your ass out.
Right. But they laid out the rules in advance. And anytime it was the Indiana Jones film, the Indiana Jones music, you had 300 people doing it on a kazoo together. Yeah, exactly like that. And it was a party. It was so much fun. So that was my favorite one.
That's really good.
To share mine, junior year of high school, Star Wars Episode 2 comes out. Me and my friends, we ditched school to go see the movie. And it's when Yoda comes out and he pulls out the lightsaber.
Yeah.
It was hundreds of people, everyone screaming, oh my God. Like, there's all the snaps and like cheering and the whooping, everyone hopping out of their seats and cheering with excitement. So yeah, I think it's great. It's the moment. Like, I think that's why the movie theater will never die. Like, we miss those experiences. It's like the ultimate third space. Right? It's just this great space to come together with strangers and experience something together in a way that you can't at your home theater or by yourself. Yeah. So what is your next money move?
We have like 3. I think there's one of them that we've already talked to, plastics, that we've talked about already on Instagram is we're playing with cinema therapy reviews. And every week when a new movie comes out, that we do a 7 to 10 minute video that is different from our channel. It's not a full breakdown. It's not a full therapeutic breakdown. It's literally Alan and I reviewing the film, but with our different strengths.
It's literally us going to be doing Siskel and Ebert like a film review, but we're also going to be reviewing sort of thematic content and potential. Like, is this is it a good movie, and is it a good movie to go to if you want to have like a discussion afterwards?
Yeah, or some sort of healing cathartic experience or whatever, right?
Like your own Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, like
kind of
a
like
thing.
what to look for type thing, right? So
that'll be its own channel on YouTube.
Will it be long form, short form?
There'll be 5 to 8-ish minutes probably, so medium length.
Medium form for you guys. I am so grateful for this conversation. You guys are creating something truly amazing that all of us could use as a model for growing our own media companies. I'm so grateful for your time and your experience that you shared with us today. Please do not stop doing what you are doing. And remember, guys, keep watching movies. And until next week. The Funded YouTuber is brought to you by Gigastar, a parent company of Gigastar Market, an SEC-registered funding portal and member of FINRA. Learn more at gigastar.io. Neither Gigastar nor its affiliated companies provide legal, regulatory, financial, or tax advice. Any opinions expressed herein are those of the authors and are the informational purposes only. The information and opinions expressed herein are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investments, objectives, financial situation, or needs of any specific investors.